Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Alexis Garcia and a hat man, David Saito-Chung, here to break down all the market action in today's session for Wednesday, October 30th. So, Dave, having you here is the treat, but it looks like the market was up to some tricks here the last hour, pulling back a little bit. So, why don't you tell us what you have on deck for us today?
Sure will. And I would say the treat is really for me to be on the show with you. Thank you, Lexi. And indeed, and I really mean it. The afternoon trick today led to a decline in the indexes, but still want to take a look at some interesting movers. We got Alphabet, the ticker GOOGL. We've got Reddit, RDDT, which had a huge move. And then we'll look at a pair of restaurant stocks that can be very, very interesting to analyze chart-wise, and that is we've got Shake Shack, SHAK, and Wingstop, WING.
All right, Dave. Well, let's get into it because you are the Obi-Wan to my Kenobi, or, Ed Carson's much better with the Star Wars references. But as you mentioned, the market pulling back late in the session, the Nasdaq finishing down about 0.6%, the S&P 500 down about 0.3%, and the Dow down about 0.2%. The Russell 2000 also falling slightly. So let's get started here looking at SPY. That's the S&P 500 ETF. And as you can see today, fading off those highs, but, still up above that 21-day line.
Great point. That's a key marker for us to determine if the uptrend is healthy. And in addition to that, it was interesting that we actually had a seesaw-like action, even though the range from low to high was relatively limited. That surprised me, Lexi, because we are in the midst of earnings season, right in the thick of things, and we have the election coming up. So we would expect volatility to be high. That said, it wasn't too sharp a drop for the S&P 500, down 0.3%, kind of giving back the prior 2 days of gains. And just the fact that you mentioned the 21-day exponential moving average, lending support, and then that nice cushion on your chart there above the 50-day moving average makes me still feel quite bullish overall.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Dave, you mentioned the range here, not as big. We have about a quarter in terms of market cap of the S&P 500 just in 5 stocks that are reporting this week. So pretty impressive that, as you mentioned, that range tightening up here. And yeah, I mean, this broke out back in September, but it's really respected that 21-day exponential moving average as we've moved forward. So let's go ahead and jump over to the Nasdaq then, because again, fading slightly here towards the close. But what are your thoughts with this chart? Because again, we're getting up near highs here, and it seems like tech really wants to reassert itself in the leadership category.
Yeah, it certainly has. That chart shows that the Nasdaq itself, and same for the Qs, the QQQ Nasdaq 100 hitting all-time highs, giving us a sense that demand for these stocks is still outweighing supply, and that's really good for us as individual investors. Now, not surprised to see, maybe a pullback, given that the Nasdaq was aiming for a 5th straight up day. We did hit a new high once again, and we're above those key moving averages that we talked about. I sense that things will continue to be volatile because I'm seeing right after the close today, we had Meta report very nice Q3 results, although a few metrics might have come in a little bit below expectations. Seeing Meta right now down about 20 points. That's about 3 to 4%. So not a major gap down like some other companies we saw. And then we're obviously going to look at some other tech companies after the close. I think Microsoft. I'll take a look at that in a bit. But overall, it seems like more tech stocks are joining the bull market than leaving.
Right. And can you talk to me about the volume here? Because before we logged on here, you were talking about, even though the close today was a little bit disappointing, what are some things that you saw that indicate some bullishness in today's session?
Well, a great question. First off, according to the homepage of investors.com and Market Surge, it looks like the volume, believe it or not, fell versus Tuesday's session, which means that institutions weren't that eager to unload stock, take profits, or cut their losses. So to me, that indicates that institutions are still in an accumulating phase. And when we look at the market over a 25 session period, we actually have seen a relatively limited amount of distribution. Distributions are significant declines in heavier volume than the prior day. And for the S&P 500, we just simply look at the New York Stock Exchange turnover, even though the S&P 500 does have a lot of Nasdaq companies. But just to stay consistent, for many decades we've analyzed the volume on the NYSE for the S&P 500, and right now it does look like at least preliminary data show we had a 3% drop in NYSE volume versus Tuesday, 5% drop in Nasdaq volume versus yesterday. So these are the kind of sort of price and volume interactions you want to see in a bull market. Gains in higher volume, declines in lower volume, and in fact, also at the bottom of the big picture, we have the general market indicators PDF. At the start of this nice run up that began, up more than a month ago, people were concerned that we had a very low accumulation distribution rating for the actual Nasdaq. It was around D minus. A C would be neutral. We've actually risen now to C on that page, and I would expect that we're going to see an improvement. In fact, in that accumulation distribution rating for the Nasdaq.
All right. Well, Dave, always great to get your analysis there. Let's take a look at IWF. That is the iShares Russell 1000 growth. And again, down slightly today, but this one has also been acting nicely after a breakout here back in September. But talk to me about small caps.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about IWF and compare that with IWD. IWF is the growth components of the Russell 1000, and you can see on that, the chart that you initially showed that it really is acting in a very healthy fashion. Also hit multi-year, if not all-time highs, and the gains over a 12-month period for IWF, that's Russell 1000 growth, have been bigger than IWD, the Russell 1000 value. So, you know, I always like to look at these two sector ETFs to get a sense of which way the market is leaning toward, more growth, higher, generally high PE valuation type of stocks, or those that are more defensive in nature. And right now, I think these two charts indicate that there's still a strong appetite for growth.
All right, well, let's take a look at the next one on the list. That's XMMO. That's the S&P mid cap momentum. And again, this one falling slightly today, about 0.5%. But talk to me about what you're seeing with this chart and why you think this is a good one for investors to look at.
Overall, this takes a slice of the mid cap 400 components that show a little more technical strength, and they tend to have companies that have above average growth in earnings and sales. This is an ETF that David Ryan, one of our special guests on the IBD Live shows, uh, introduced to the audience, and I thought it was really interesting to maybe track this going forward because the 12-month performance has been really excellent. You can see that it's pulled back some after a breakout past that resistance around 120, 121. But I'm using this XMMO ETF, Alexis, also as another gauge to see whether we should be putting more money into stocks that have leadership qualities, both in fundamentals and in technical action.
All right. Well, let's wrap up this part with a look at Bitcoin ETF. This went down about 0.9% today, but looks like it's trying to come up off lows here, Dave, and establish itself above this 20 price level. So, what are your thoughts here with Bitcoin?
It seems like there are people bargain hunting here. And with this chart, I think it's interesting that it's in between two moving averages I look at closely, the black 200-day moving average, which is kind of flattened out, and your red 50-day moving average, which is starting to curl higher. And so it feels like there's potential for a sea change here, and that greed has kind of returned as an emotion within Bitcoin. It's really hard to really talk about fundamentals, right? So I think that the chart really helps us look at what is the feeling among investors. Are they getting more greedy, or are they getting more fearful? Seems like they're getting a little more greedy.
Yes, it seems like they are, especially ahead of this election. Well, speaking of greedy, let's take a look at Reddit because
hmm
what a day today for this stock, up about 42% on just gangbuster earnings here, Dave, just surging out of a profit zone. So, talk to me about this chart.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this one. We love covering IPOs or newer issues, even though Reddit's been around a long time. Lexi, are you a user of Reddit, by the way?
I am a very dedicated Vanderpump Rules subreddit user. But it was really interesting because I got to hear their CEO speak a couple weeks ago.
hmm
And with all the proliferation of AI, especially into search, he was saying that their biggest competitive edge is the humans behind all of their subreddits, and that when people are using Reddit as search more because they want to trust that they're talking to other people. So I thought that was really
Oh,
interesting. Mhm.
that is a great insight. And it's so funny. I mean, I hate to bring this up, but usually the weather and the west side of LA is just wonderful, especially in this time of year. But there was, believe it or not, all across West LA, a very, very foul smell, and everyone was wondering what's going on. So people went on to Reddit to find out what they're seeing, listening, hearing, and I was really pleasantly surprised by how Reddit can be that kind of useful in just your everyday life. I'm not a active user like you, but I hope to be, because I'm looking at this chart and I'm thinking it's a rare kind of company to rise 41% on earnings. I do want to highlight that the 16-cent profit per share is pretty pretty impressive here, especially when they lost 5 cents a share in the year ago quarter. And look at that sales growth accelerating up 68%,
Mhm.
and that was at least a third quarter in a row of accelerating revenue growth. These kind of fundamentals really are exciting and what we're looking for if you want to find big stock market winners. Now, I want to go to the 5 minute chart and show how
Yes,
the
please do. Because
yeah,
I know you all were talking about this on IBD Live this morning. And so, talk to me a little bit about this chart and how you handle these big breakaway earnings gaps.
yeah, and the thing is, right, there's always risk buying a stock, even though it's close to an IBD style buy point right before the earnings, because it could easily go the other way, right? But
Mhm.
when you have a gap up like this, and you've got a company that has something new as a leader, good fundamentals, or something really exciting, what we do look at is the 5 minute bar. And in this chart right here, we're going to be looking at the first two 5 minute bars, and the top of that 5 minute action was at 114. If the stock holds above 114 and starts rising again, you could actually enter the stock as an alternate buy point at 114. In fact,
Mhm.
full disclosure, I did myself. I actually bought a small position as it was going back above 114, and just to, not as a big full position or anything like that, but just to find a way in, because this kind of action is often seen among stocks that double or triple in price after a big breakout like that. Now, you still have to cut your losses short if it reverses, if the market weakens. And so I'm going to strictly apply a 7% loss cutting rule from 114 and see how it goes. Now, if we go to the daily chart, once again, you see that this is a stock at all-time highs. For those who bought the stock at a breakout on October 4th, That was a nice move past a handle buy point at around 69.11. You know, kudos to you for getting that stock, because that was 3 or 4 weeks before today's earnings. I find it was interesting that the stock was making a nice steady rally, but really was waiting for the quarterly report. And so I
Mhm.
felt it was really important to highlight this stock given the incredible volume that you see. It looked like it was probably the highest volume since the IPO as well, and a 42% gain. If the stock does pull back, I would expect the stock to not eat into the positive gap that was produced between yesterday's close at 81.74 and today's low of 104.11.
So then, Dave, if you did get back in at this breakout here, and we heard Justin Nielsen talk a little bit about this this morning, how do you manage taking some profits, or do you let this one ride? How would you approach that?
Well, for those who have a very large profit here, I think at this point you want to,
Congratulations, first of all.
yeah, congratulations to those, right? They got their Halloween treat early, and I think one general rule is to hold it a minimum of 8 weeks. And you could say 8 weeks since that breakout on October 4th, which would mean try to hold it through early December, and then see how the stock looks. And then from that point on, decide, do I want to just take some profits, exit the entire position, or maybe hold for a bigger move? So that could mean holding it for 6 months to 12 months, and see if you can find some additional buy points along the way. For me, because I've got in relatively late, I'm probably more prone to maybe take a short-term gain and then wait for another traditional entry point, and that could be a pullback to the 10-week moving average, or a brand new base that forms.
All right. Well, Dave, thanks so much for that. And let's take a look at Google then, because as we know, Alphabet's been around for a while. I'll switch back to the daily chart, but they also reported earnings. And this one fading off intraday highs today, but still a nice gain of about 2.8%.
Yeah, exactly. And here you can see that it outperformed the market, but it's a reversal toward the day's lows, sort of mirrored what happened in the Nasdaq. And the 5 minute bar, 5 minute intraday chart might be very helpful for everyone here, because if we're looking to buy this stock on the breakaway gap, taking the first two 5 minute bars on that chart, we get a buy point, an alternate buy point at 182.02. Well, the stock actually never surpassed that 182.02 buy point, so therefore that alternate entry was never triggered. Uh, I think from here, maybe we can expect the stock to keep building the right side of the base. And for that reason, I would go to a weekly chart, and I can see that, it's been 2 months of base building on the right side after the stock bottomed out with a nice reversal in the weekend at 913. It's nice to see that in the three most recent down weeks, volume was actually below average. So that to me indicates that maybe there's more demand on net than supply for this stock.
All right. And yes, as you can see on the weekly here, some nice tight action too around that 40-week line. But Dave, let's go ahead and jump over to Shake Shack, also a mover today. I'll switch back to the weekly, up about 7.8%. But again, like the rest of the market, fading here toward the lower end of that trading range today. So, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, given that I've been given so much time to talk about those others, I'll keep the comments brief here. But Shake Shack, you can see, struggled on its breakout past a very deep handle and a very deep base. That handle provided an entry point around 111.17. And then finally on earnings, it made this nice pop, really great action, and it deserved it because you had really strong earnings growth and consistent double-digit sales growth. But here again, once we look at the 5 minute chart, you can see that the stock uh, created an alternate buy point at 125.48, and then it moved back above that about 2%, now pulled back. And so uh, I think if you're still watching the stock, maybe you'll want to see if it surpasses that alternate entry 125.48 as a place to possibly enter the stock. If you did buy on the breakaway gap, still very important to keep losses small and look for continued strength in the stock. The other one, Wing, is a direct example of how there's always risk going into the earnings report, and this is a company that's growing pretty much as fast as Shake Shack, in terms of sales and the number of stores and whatnot. But I wanted to talk about this one too, Lexi, because you can see that unlike Shake Shack, which had a clear buy point and was holding above the buy point, this stock had tried to break out a month or two ago and could not hold those gains. And so, hoping that people respect the chart before they make any decision to buy, especially before a big piece of news like earnings.
All right, well, there's another treat for your basket. Respect the chart. Well, Dave, we had a couple big earnings come in after the close. So let's just check on some of the after hours action, starting with Meta. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what you know about Meta earnings and what you're seeing on the chart here?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the stock was down as much as like I think 14 or 15 points after the initial headlines came out, and earnings of $6.03 a share was well ahead of all of the analysts' expectations. There are 42 analysts with published estimates, and Meta beat them all. The sales came in quite nicely. Didn't beat all the estimates, but that was above average. There's some other metrics, like I mentioned, like daily people usage was a little bit below expectations, but right now Meta seems to have uh, erased those early after hours losses, and we'll probably see some more volatility as the company has its conference call and Q&A. So overall, though, it looks pretty good, and it continues to be a full size position on Leaderboard, which is a model stock portfolio of IBD style growth stocks. And then why don't we look at Microsoft MSFT? And I didn't get a chance to look at the numbers yet, but that stock is up about 1.6% after hours. That's a positive because you can see that if you were to draw a trend line from the top of the base at 468, it's clearly breaking that trend line, exactly the one you drew right there. It seems like it's getting more momentum, and don't know exactly all the numbers, but we'll definitely have some great coverage on investors.com.
All right. Well, Dave, that's a great way to wrap it up. Thanks so much for your insights today. And as you mentioned, we'll be back with more market analysis tomorrow morning, starting with IBD Live. So you can head on over to investors.com/IBD Live for all the details there. And we'll see you right back here tomorrow after the closing bell.